Okay, we are up on both YouTube and Twitch and podcasting. Chicka chicka yeah, chicka yeah, chicka yeah.
All right. Welcome, everyone.
Just so you know, we're gonna do Mortal Kombat for everybody on Twitch. We changed it. We're doing Pokemon Snap.
Yeah, we didn't even really know what we were going to do for this game because we're kind of transitioning between another game that we're going to play soon and a couple of guests have other games that they're playing. So we weren't sure what we wanted to play today.
And so we ended up in Pokemon Snap because we randomly saw it.
And guess what? We have not played Pokemon Snap since we were kids, since we rented it. So
yeah.
So there's going to be some interesting. We'll see what happens through this.
This is misleading. It says press start. You'd think the yellow option would be the select.
Oh yeah, but it's
the
white flashing up.
That's why I couldn't get going.
What are you going to name your character? We're just logging on right now to Pokemon Snap, and we get to pick our
pretty short name. Probably
JD.
J-Dog.
All right, everyone. Well, for those of you that aren't on the Facebook group, didn't know what we're talking about today, today's episode, or didn't read the episode title when they streamed it on the podcast on whatever site you're using, we're talking about console wars today. And for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about when we are talking about console wars, we're actually going to talk a little bit about a documentary that we watched called Console Wars, but it mostly focuses on oh, sorry, I thought we were having issues with the stream for a second. We're good.
Okay.
Sorry. I lost my train of thought. Oh, we are going to talk a little bit about a documentary called Console Wars, which basically talks about the battle between Nintendo and Sega in the early mid-90s when they were kind of battling back and forth to be the best console. And yeah, I thought we'd talk about that. And then after that, we're going to talk about some of the highest selling console games, as well as our favorites, and people on the chat can jump in. And we also had a poll for best consoles. So,
it's Annabelle, but as I, have been pronouncing it on the rest of the podcast, Alicia Annabelle. Hey yo, she said, Blockbusters was dope.
Blockbuster was dope.
Blockbusters was.
We are actually going to do a whole episode on Blockbuster. So, yeah. And thanks, Annabelle. You've been on like every week, so really appreciate it. Thanks for commenting too.
And Carson just jumped on and he said, "Boys, what's
Hello,
up?"
Carsonian. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about this documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's on Paramount Plus. You can stream it on Paramount Plus, and I think Amazon too.
Well, you can rent it on Amazon. It costs. It wasn't free on Amazon. I think it's only like $3.99 to rent, but
pretty cheap.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know. Let's talk about that documentary first a little bit, and then we'll dive into the consoles that we like best. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
There's a lot of reading on this game, so I'm just going to figure it out as we go so I can get into the game. Because I can't read and listen to you, and
it'd just be like when we were kids again. When we rented the games, we never read through the instructions. We just went right to it.
Exactly.
So it'll just be like when we're playing as kids again. Funny enough, we had Dylan on last week. Thanks for those that listen to that podcast. And Dylan's on the live as well right now. But he's the big Pokemon fan. And we've actually talked about this game twice now on the podcast.
But this doesn't look familiar to me. Do you recognize this?
Just hit let's go and then you'll start cruising and you just see, this looks familiar.
It does not to me at all.
Oh yeah, this looks familiar. Now you just turn your camera. Z to aim.
Which one's?
Okay, we can't. You're just gonna have to figure it out as we're
as
we're going. But we did make fun of this game being a first-person shooter.
Yeah, I guess it is. Oh man,
Yeah.
I got Pidgey.
But it's funny because we had Dylan on last week. He's the Pokemon fan, and we didn't even play Pokemon. So, all right. So, Console Wars, the documentary. So basically, I'm just going to give kind of an overview of what went on in the documentary, and then we can talk about it, and then we can dive into consoles. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
So the documentary is really well done. I don't know if you felt the same way. I thought it was really well done.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it and way interesting.
Yeah. And it's crazy that we like lived that time period, but as the kids in the show, you know, we didn't really know how big of a deal the battle was between Sega and Nintendo. But basically what it goes over is Nintendo, they kind of start the documentary with talking about how much Nintendo dominates the console field. That Nintendo had the NES and it was just crushing it, and it was a console system that everybody had to have. At Christmas, they showed tons of videos of kids at Christmas getting Nintendos and how cool that was. And
oh man, that just brought me back.
Yeah,
when I was watching those, like the old school videotaping of it too.
Do you remember when we got the N64?
That's what I was gonna bring up, man. It was
that was like the best.
It was
Christmas
like exactly
ever.
that. Those little kids are like, Sega, you know. We're like, yeah,
yeah. And they're like, Nintendo.
I mean, we didn't get hyped up for Sega, but the Sega reactions were more like us for N64. I feel like
in that documentary, yeah, for sure.
But their commercials in there were awesome too.
Just for the listeners, it was kind of funny though. I don't know how much you remember that day. I remember that day pretty vividly because I got hockey sticks.
Was that the same time?
Yeah, and
we both got hockey sticks.
Yeah, and at the end we were like, oh man, we didn't get the N64. We wanted that, but we got all this cool stuff. I also got the Mighty Mighty Boss Stones album because I wanted the Backstreet Boys album, and my parents didn't know who the Backstreet Boys were, and they got me the Mighty Mighty Boss Stones. That song is like, so here I am, getting older all the time.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
So I got that CD, and I remember I was like,
that
oh,
just
cool.
reminds me of the game, the Tony Hawk game that was on.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. That's one of the best game soundtracks ever. Tony Hawk and Tony Hawk 2. All the Tony Hawks.
That game, that one specifically reminds me of the mall.
Oh yeah.
Skating the mall. I don't know why.
So I remember we had all this stuff. We were like, this is such a cool Christmas. And some of our Christmases we didn't get a ton of stuff. And we weren't really thinking we'd get an N64. And then do you remember Mom and Dad had hid it behind a blanket? And they're like, oh, we have one more thing. And they took the blanket up and we're like, oh yeah,
already
the blanket's over there.
Over the TV.
Yeah, and they dropped it and the Nintendo was right there and set up. And it was Mario Kart was the game, and we were like, "What? This is the best news ever!" So yeah, I don't know if any of you have experiences like that. Drop them in the chat. But
yeah, for sure.
Back to the documentary. Nintendo was just dominating at the time in the industry. They had NES. Super Mario Bros. Was just huge. It was just a massive, massive game at the time. And Sega was just a really small company, and a couple of other companies had tried to get in on the console war and build their own consoles, and it just was not working. And I think the documentary said that like at the time before Sega dropped in, Nintendo accounted for 95% of the video game market. So just they weren't even threatened by anybody, just absolutely dominating the market. And so Sega hired this to try and keep up, and they were not doing well at all with their consoles. They hired this bigwig marketing director. Apparently he was the guy who was the marketing director for Barbie and was super successful.
Oh wow.
With that. That was in the documentary.
I must have missed it.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So, and he takes over and he decides to go to war with Nintendo. So he basically plans an all-out war on Nintendo, dogging Nintendo. And basically his big marketing strategy was to push the teen games on Sega and to show that Nintendo was lame and it was for kids. and that Nintendo didn't have the cool violent content, and that was their big push. They were big on making Nintendo seem like a kid's game, and it worked really well actually. They ended up taking over the market for a while, and I guess the biggest game that kind of said that like Sega was winning over Nintendo was Mortal Kombat, which is why we thought it'd be fun to play Mortal Kombat today. Because when Mortal Kombat came out, Sega was like, hey, we're going to keep the violence. There's a lot of violence. It was funny watching the documentary because the violence on that documentary now compared to violence in video games now.
Like the green blood and...
Yeah. Just like the blood in general was just so pixelated and it's just so cheesy when you think about it compared to like, like Call of Duty or something like that now.
Oh yeah. It's just, you can literally like blow off heads now. And before it was just like, I wouldn't even call them blood splatters. It was like colored squares.
Yeah, it was colored squares. Even when in Mortal Kombat, when he like rips the dude's head off and his spine comes out, and that sounds, even saying that out loud sounds like, whoa, that'd be gruesome. When you see it on the show, they showed it, and it was just so cheesy. Yeah. But when Mortal Kombat came out, it was going to be released on both consoles, and Sega was starting to do really well. Sega was doing really well because of, in my opinion, their only good game, which was Sonic, which was their attempt at going after Mario.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was kind of crazy that like it's weird that I haven't put the two together as like a competition kind of thing. Like Sonic was against Mario. I mean, I don't remember being a kid like going,
yeah, but when you think
Sonic's
back
better
on it,
than Mario. Mario's better than Sonic. But I don't remember having a lot of friends with like Sega. Like I said, I think I said
it was a more expensive console too.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just throw in Mario Kart or something just because.
I'm sorry.
Well, this game is kind of slow pace and boring. What do you think? Should we just switch out and go to Mario?
Yeah, let's just do it. Yeah. I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I just feel a little bad. Let's just hit up old school Mario Kart.
And
for those of you on the podcast, yeah, let's do N64. Okay. For those of you on the podcast, we're just trying to play Pokemon Snap, and it's just a slow game. So we're gonna entertain those peeps watching the stream.
If I can do it, I'm still a learner.
Suspend menu. That button. There you go. Game selection. Reading. It's such a challenge.
It is.
Yeah, let's just play some Mario. We'll just play some Mario Kart.
That's a tough one.
But yeah, so Sega was actually doing really well with Sonic because Sonic was such a quick, fast-paced game. And they were kind of showing that Nintendo was behind on the graphics and Sonic was ahead, and Sega was ahead and Sonic was killing it. And yeah, so they were doing really well. And the thing that kind of tipped the thing that tipped Sega over the edge was actually having Mortal Kombat show all the violence. So Mortal Kombat was going to be released on both systems. It was going to be released on Nintendo and Sega. But with Sega and Nintendo, Nintendo was not going to show all of the graphics. They were going to have green blood, like you said, Jordan. Like they're going to have green blood instead of red blood to make it less violent. And they weren't going to have like certain moves like the spine being ripped out of the person's body. They weren't going to have those moves on there anymore. So
wasn't there like an outrage that they didn't do that though?
Yeah. So it ended up backlashing on Nintendo because they thought they were going to be in the parents' good graces because they're like, hey, look, guys, like we look at us, guys. We are censoring. We're keeping this good for your children. And it kind of had it kind of backfired on them. They said they even had parents complaining that it didn't have the graphics. They were like, Hey guys,
That's so wild.
yeah, we wanted the blood and violence. Some parents, so you can't win either way, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it backfired, and this is when a lot of people say Sega took over, because Sega accounted for I think it was like 90% of the Mortal Kombat sales. So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is when Sega took over, and their sales did rise. So do you have any comments on that, Jordan, on the idea of Sonic versus Mario within the documentary?
Just I just thought it was kind of crazy that they were like versus each other. Like
Yeah.
that's why Sonic was created, to beat Mario. Because you don't put two and two together. I did see the one commercial on the documentary that they showed. I don't think it wasn't a commercial. It was like a little cartoon video game looking skit of Sonic coming out of Mario's tubes.
Oh,
You know?
yeah.
And I'm like, wait, wouldn't that be a cool collab? Like the two games together.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they should do like
Well, they
a
have
Super
him,
Smash Brothers.
They
and
have
add
him on
Sonic.
Super Smash Brothers.
Sonic is?
Yeah, we just talked about this in the last episode with Dylan.
I
was like, oh, they should do Sonic, and he was like, they have him as a playable character.
I was too busy making sure I was responding to all your comments. Man, that's a busy job, so I didn't listen.
Oh, okay. excuses.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, that Sega kind of thought they were on top of the world at that point. Their sales were through the roof. They were doing really well. And then the big downfall of Sega. Well, actually, how did you feel about how they portrayed Nintendo in the documentary versus how they portrayed Sega?
Say that again. Sorry.
How do you feel about how they portrayed Sega in the documentary versus how they portrayed Nintendo?
How they portrayed it? Like,
No, portrayed. Like, sorry, I'm having a hard time saying. Like, how do you feel they? Okay, I'll just say how I felt, and then that'll maybe help you.
I don't really.
I just
understand
felt
what
like they
you're
were
asking.
really leaning on Sega, and like acting like Sega was legit. They were the adult, like the people that they were interviewing. It felt like they were favoring Sega throughout the whole documentary. Like it felt more like a Sega documentary
It did.
than a
Okay, I
console
see what
wars
you're saying.
documentary.
Yeah, I feel like it was definitely leaning towards like
Like,
how
Nintendo's
Sega
the
took over
bad
the
guy.
market over the top of Nintendo, even though they had the market for so long. You know.
Yeah, and how like it was like, oh, Nintendo's the bad guy because they had a monopoly over the market and all this stuff, right?
Yeah. It definitely did feel like that. Like
It felt like they were really favoring Sega, in my opinion. That was one of the things that I didn't like about the documentary watching it. I was like, and that's also because we were Nintendo kids. And I'm sure part of that was our parents wanted us to play games that were more childish. And I think Nintendo's kind of stuck to that. They've been big sticklers about
How do you even reverse? Dang it.
you know, it's getting it's so easy to beat you.
I hate life. I hate my life so much. I was saying in my head when I started this race, I'm like, because I was doing pretty good right at the beginning. I'm like, I gotta beat him because he kept saying in the other podcast how he always won me. Well, he's right.
I just took first and Jordan
And
took eighth.
My life sucks. And thanks, Carson. Oh, you know what? I take that back.
What?
He's like, go Jordan. And then he's like, oh no, is Jordan Yoshi? Go Matt. I hate you, man. 8th place? Come on, man. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Why
I'm
did I
Princess Peach and Jordan's Yoshi, and both went with lights.
I'm just
Hey, don't feel bad.
I'm just giving you a good shout.
We just want to make sure we follow the content that we have to while we're playing.
Yeah.
So
As
yeah.
he gets first while he's like saying everything, and I'm just like,
Well, part of it's because you're
"Doo-doo-doo."
not playing.
Hey, I can't multitask.
Well, we're finding out. Pretty. You know, you did really well. I feel like the first 2 episodes when we were doing Super Mario World, you were really well. You were doing really well at it, and since then you struggled with the multitasking.
Well, because I got made fun of for not ever winning you, and so now it's just all in my head.
Yeah. And to be fair, I haven't played much games on the podcast. I've kind of just been hosting it more. So, anyway, let's get back to the documentary because we got a lot of ground to cover still. So, Nintendo was dominating, Sega was dominating. They were doing the best, and then Nintendo. And this is kind of where the third party comes in. Nintendo announces that they're going to do a 64-bit console, which ended up being the N64. They announced this. And at the same time, Sony is trying to get into the market with the PlayStation during this time period too. So it's late 90s. They want to get into the console wars. And funny enough, Sega was like, we got to release something. If Nintendo's going to release something, let's team up with Sony and release a console together. And Sony was actually on board with that. Sony originally wanted to team up with Sega and wanted to release a new console when the disc console started coming out with better graphics, better setup, and that was the original plan. And for some reason, after they kind of already agreed that they would do that, for some reason the head of Sega pulled out, and they don't really know why. And it ended up costing them. It ended up being a very bad decision, because we all know no one has a Sega in their house anymore, right? But everybody has a PlayStation.
Probably Dylan does.
That's true, but most
sit on that. Second place.
Well, I had to let you feel,
fifth.
I'm just being
whatever.
the nice brother. So we'll hold off for a minute on the next race. And get through this. I feel like I'm saying a lot.
You might be.
Yeah. So,
I'm not sure.
And did you know Nintendo, this wasn't in the documentary, but Nintendo also wanted to partner up with Sony, or Sony wanted to partner up with Nintendo originally. And they ended up going, no. They kind of talked about it and they said no. And a lot of people point to that as the worst business decision ever made. Not just in consoles, but ever made. Because if you think about it, they would have teamed up with PlayStation. By saying no to that, they had to compete with that company, and that company went on to just do amazing things, right? And so a lot of people point to that as being one of the biggest mistakes. You could also point to that with Sega. So Sega decides, okay, we've got to keep up. We're going to release, they have the Sega Genesis, and they're like, we're going to release the Sega Saturn, which is going to be our big next console. But the problem is the technology just wasn't there for them.
Did you ever play the Sega? That's the Pirates version. Sega Saturn?
No. I honestly hadn't even heard of it.
I had heard of it probably because of Dylan. But I don't know. I hardly remember what it looks like.
So it was a disc
the little
console.
picture it showed on the.
It kind of looked a lot like the PlayStation, but it had kind of a weird controller, a more like boxy controller. So that was they were like, oh, we're gonna release the Sega Saturn. So people were pretty excited about the Sega Saturn, but there's two issues with their release. One of the main issues that happened was they pushed the release. So N64 wasn't quite ready and wasn't there with the technology for the N64, and they pushed back the date. And they were like, no, we're not going to release the N64 until it's ready.
And Sega wasn't really ready either.
Yeah,
right?
Sega wasn't
But they're
ready.
like, do it anyways. We need to just do this now regardless.
Because of PlayStation. Because PlayStation was about to drop, and they're like, we need to get ahead of PlayStation. We need to release before PlayStation. And so that's what they did. They released before PlayStation, like the day before PlayStation came out, and they rushed the marketing, and it ended up not working out very well for them with the Sega Saturn. Everybody went to the PlayStation. In fact, I've got notes here, but I've got to finish this race before I look at them, because I'm in first place right now, and Jordan is in second because I'm
I'm in third. Wario's behind you.
Oh, crap. Oh, no. Yes. Dang it.
This is the worst.
Jordan knocked his red shell into me, but it boost me forward.
Pushed him into the first place still. This sucks.
Oh, and the other reason why, I have my notes here. So the other reason why they consider Nintendo's move not to go with Sony such a big flop is they tried teaming up with Philips CDI and put out that console, and it was a massive failure of a console.
Is that the one that they? No, never mind. I was gonna say, is that the one they did ET on? But that was
No, that's the Atari.
Yeah, that was Atari. I knew that though.
Yeah.
Carson's like, oh man, what a nail biter.
Yeah, so I guess the main reason for the drop in sales was with between the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation. The biggest reason was because no one really knew what was better graphically at that point. But the biggest reason was PlayStation was marketing and selling their PlayStation console for $299, and Sega was doing their
Wasn't it like $399 or something like that.
dude. It was $499
That is how much consoles
today,
now cost.
and that was back then.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think what's the PlayStation 5 is like 500.
I don't know, but it's expensive.
I think the one that's doesn't have the CD drive in it is
cheaper.
I want to say it's $499.
Oh, is it more expensive without the CD?
No,
drive?
no, it's
Okay.
because I think the other one's like $599
So,
or something like that.
When they went to there's a big launch date at this big convention, and Sega goes up first to tell everybody about how awesome the Sega Saturn is. They're like, graphics are awesome, and we had to have a high price because of quality, and this is why it's so much. And they went on and did this whole presentation, right? And Sony came up after them to present, and all they did is they walked up and they said $299 and then left. And they're just like, yeah, whatever. They're charging you $499. The PlayStation, we're only going to charge you $299. Buy our PlayStation. And it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Just so you know, the PS5 is $559 at GameStop, and it's $459 for the one without the disc
Without
drive.
the disc drive. Okay, so
just digital games.
so they were literally, and that's today's money.
Crazy. That's crazy
today's
because you
money.
think like everything's up in price, like with like inflation and everything, and you're like, well, except for video games, we still paid the same amount for a console back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And that's not adjusting for inflation. So they charged $499
just because they
in
knew
1996. No, I guess it was they struggled because their tech wasn't there and they had to use two 32-bit
PlayStation.
No, Sega. Sega was $499.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and Sega used like 230.
No, I was asking if PlayStation struggled. They didn't struggle. At
No, they did really well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's still $300, and they did well.
That's kind of what took over. So Sony PlayStation dropped, the 3D Realm came in, and then N64 released their console a year later, and the N64 did really well too. And that was kind of the end for Sega. In fact, that after that point, they never grossed a higher. So the Sega Genesis was their highest grossing console, then the Sega Saturn, then the next one that they had, which was the what was the name of it? I have it here. I know it as soon as I'm going to say it.
Look it up.
Dreamcast.
Dreamcast. Okay, Dreamcast, yeah.
And
again, another one I never played.
Yeah. Well, I don't think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Both of them. Just because
I remember hearing about it growing up. I just never had it. But if it wasn't a popular one, like that wasn't the one we were focused on anyways, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But real quick, Dad said, Mom and I knew how much the consoles cost. Even though we never knew how to play them,
because they bought them for us. We should have asked them before today's episode. You know what it was like trying to shop for those, because they were just flying off the shelves. What must have been like shopping for your children in those days. I can't imagine now as a parent how stressful that would have been.
It reminds me of that Christmas movie with like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, the toy movie.
The toy one where they like,
have you seen
fighting
8-Bit Christmas on
no.
HBO Max?
No.
Anyone who hasn't seen 8-Bit Christmas, you should watch it. It's all about this kid trying to get a Nintendo. It's really good. It's a newer movie. Cool. I like it a lot.
Dad said they had connections.
They had connections?
Tell me how much you paid for our N64 if you remember.
Yeah, right. He doesn't even remember like how to walk from your house to his house. They live next door, everybody.
Well, if you can ask your wife if she's there, Dad.
Yeah, she'll remember.
Ask her how much the Nintendo 64 was when you paid for it, even if you got it for a deal from your hookup. Quotes.
Yeah, that sounds sketch.
Yeah, they stole it. That's all. We couldn't afford it. We just stole it.
No, we just stole it.
No. Carson said he's never even seen a Sega before.
Period. Even a Sega Genesis, Carson? That's crazy. I think I've only played one like once or twice. I think there's this friend of the family, is our parents' friends. We had to always play. Oh, that's crazy. We always had to play with their kids. I won't say who they are, but and they had every console ever. So we played at Josh's house.
Oh yeah,
I think we played Sega a bit there. So yeah, so Sega ended up falling out. Nintendo and PlayStation kind of took over at that point, and that's kind of where the documentary leaves off. And it kind of leaves off by basically saying like, it's kind of like, oh, boo-hoo, Sega, they were the better console, and it shouldn't have been that way. Did you notice that? That kind of bugged me.
Yeah.
Like, well, you guys had sucky games. That's the only thing I remember.
They did say that they took some very harsh ways of advertising, like negative campaigning, basically, like bagging on Sega. Okay. They were like bagging on Nintendo to get their product known.
Yeah, and that was smart.
Which is smart.
Yeah, it was just on them.
Well, I was just saying, it's funny they were doing that, and then also in this documentary, they're still like, well, but we were still better.
Yeah, that's true. But we were better. The campaign ads spoke for themselves.
I'll tell you what, though. Those commercials that I was watching, I'm like, those are good. Those are good. Like Sega. I feel like I remember a Sega commercial.
Oh
maybe.
yeah, I'm
but
sure.
Like, it wasn't like this. It's stuck out in my childhood kind of thing. But yeah, I remember like the Sega. To be honest, the commercial I remember the most from as a kid is the Budweiser commercials.
Yeah, the
Budweiser. Or
the what's up? Oh gosh, we did not just do that on our podcast.
Yeah, we did. Oh, and that's cool.
We're both doing really bad talking when playing. It was nice to have Dylan on last week, and he struggled a bit too. He was way better than us, but he struggled a bit playing and talking. Didn't really
to be like, hey guys, he was doing really well.
he was doing better than us, but he's still struggling. Yeah, so my takeaway from the documentary, I don't know about you, Jordan, what else you wanted to talk about with it, but was I still to this day, even when they were showing all the games, they're like, look at all the games that Sega has. Their games sucked. They had terrible games. Like, the only game that I know of on Sega that rocked was Sonic.
Well, and Mortal Kombat was good.
Mortal Kombat was an exclusive. So you could play that on the SNES.
That's true.
So I'm saying like their only exclusive game that was good on their console was Sonic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so for
me, anybody who's commenting in the comments, you should, if you know of other ones that you liked or recognized more, you should throw it out. Because I can't even think of any others. I think maybe I played like maybe airplane game, but I could be mixing that up with like a computer game when I was over at my uncle's house. I can't remember. Yeah,
I honestly because any game that I start to think, oh yeah, that was on the Sega, right? No, it's on the PlayStation. Like when I'm thinking about what was the one that's kind of Crash Bandicoot. What is it? Crash Bandicoot.
Oh, the one we talked about today.
Yeah.
But I want to say Crash Bandicoot now. Is
that what it is? I can't remember. But
Crash Bandicoot's the racing one.
No, that's Diddy Kong Racing. You're thinking?
No, Crash Bandicoot, I believe, is also a racing one.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah,
Crash Bandicoot is not a racing one. It's the one that looks kind of like Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, never mind. It is Crash Bandicoot then.
Okay.
And Banjo-Kazooie is the one I was thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a racing game, isn't it?
No, he's just on Diddy Kong Racing.
What do I know? I don't even know what I'm doing here.
It's like, why do you have a podcast about video games?
Because we know everything about them.
Yep.
And that's what is.
Yeah. So, I mean, my takeaway from it, they talked a lot about this marketing campaign, what went wrong, what went right. In my opinion, it was like, no, your guys' system failed because all you had was Sonic. That's all you had. And if you would have had more than Sonic, it would have sold more. The games speak for themselves. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are your feelings on the documentary?
I mean, yeah, I feel like we both kind of took away of it the same. I felt like they were kind of mainly just trying to justify how much better they were, but they weren't. They were not better.
They weren't that better.
Like Nintendo was straight up better, and all
so was
aspects,
PlayStation.
like they knew when to put stuff out. They knew when they were putting stuff out. It was well done.
Yeah, their games hold up. You can think of so many games that Nintendo put out that were really good games, from Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros, Star Fox, Super Mario Bros, all 4 of them, right?
Yeah.
Even on the SNES, and even Mario Kart on the SNES was really fun.
I loved playing that too.
And they had better games. And Sony PlayStation, same type of situation where they had good content. They had Tomb Raider. They had, what's that? What was the other one?
Spyro.
Yeah.
That's Spyro. I loved Spyro.
That's the dinosaur one, right?
Yeah, like you were a dragon.
Yeah.
Spyro the dragon,
So
yeah.
they had good games. I think the games are what sells consoles, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Is the best consoles, it's all about the gameplay. You can market things as much as you want, but it's all about the game.
I have a top 10 list of my consoles that I like.
Okay.
And I think primarily I picked them because of the games.
Yeah.
So, and kind of the placement because of them too. Like how often I played them, what games like really wrote me for a long time. Those kind of things is kind of how I came up with my top 10. It wasn't just like because I loved Super Nintendo, but it's not my top.
Yeah.
So, and
it doesn't have a lot of games either. Well, it had a ton of games, but I just think that they don't have a ton of great games. They have
I'd just say I got more into video games as video games became, better. They developed with as time always does. It develops.
Time and technology.
And so like PlayStation's, Xboxes, like the graphics get better, the games get more intense, and so much more involved in them and stuff. So obviously, that's kind of what determined where mine placed. And I'll read those off to you here in a second.
Cool.
Real quick. Dad said 64 was the best investment and most appreciated Christmas gift of all time. You're welcome, Dad.
I mean, we're doing a podcast literally like based on that now.
Yeah.
So, it had an impact on our life.
And he said, if he remembers right, they paid $375.
Wow. Okay. So not much cheaper.
Yeah.
Pull this off just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
And
then let's see. Sorry. Carson said Spyro took a huge amount of inspiration from Mario 64. They made Spyro after how fun it was to. Oh, why is my screen doing that? To move around in Mario. It looks like I can't read some of it. Sorry if I messed that up a bit. Also, Spyro was originally going to be green, but it clashed too much with
Yoshi?
the grass, so they made him purple.
Oh,
That's cool.
That's a cool fact. Yeah. I would have thought that it would have looked like they were having
copying
Yoshi.
Yeah, that would make sense.
That's cool. Those are cool comments.
Purple's my favorite color, so I'm down with Spyro being purple over green anyways.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The only other thing that I felt was really relevant to the documentary is everyone should watch it. It was really cool. It was entertaining. It was fun. They definitely favored Sega in the documentary, but I liked it. So I thought it was well done.
Yeah, it was.
Any
It was
final
great to
thoughts on the
watch, for sure.
documentary before we move on to some other stuff that we have?
I think it's cool how they did, Nintendo of Japan. Was it Japan? Sorry.
Yeah, Nintendo's a Japan
Nintendo of
product.
Japan and Sega of Japan. And then they did Nintendo of America and Sega of America just to get it into the States. But they didn't just come over here and sell it to us. They actually hired in the United States to. I just thought that was interesting, kind of how they were separate entities, but they still, like Sega of America would make sure they ran everything by Sega of Japan because they were initially the owners, right? But it's just kind of interesting that there was two separate entities. It wasn't like full on one Sega, because they released different games in each place. They
do that every time still with different consoles. You still get different releases.
It's just wild to me that they do that, but I mean,
so I mean, Americans, I guess they're just, you know, crazy
they find
fact,
what people like in each, you know, culture and stuff like that. So I can totally see that. But
you know, one fact that we should mention on that podcast was the Sega did extremely well in the US, but did not do well in Japan. Remember? And America was where they were launching like an all-out attack on Nintendo, and in Japan they didn't do that. So Sega was a lot more successful in America than it was in Japan.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. So, well, cool. Good documentary, guys. Again, it's called Console Wars. And I'd heard about the documentary for a while. That wasn't really the main point of the lesson of the podcast today, was to focus on that documentary. I just thought if we're going to name
Matt,
my lecture today will be about video games. So
put away your phone.
Yeah. So, well, let's pull up the poll. We put up a poll. Let's talk about kind of the console wars today. And we put up a poll on our Facebook group. Thanks again for everybody who voted. We had 37 votes. So I'm just going to read a list. Jordan, how about you go into just single player mode and play the campaign while I go through some of the stuff that we have here, just because you'll be able to guess some of the things, and we'll go over the top 10s, and you can do your input on that. Does that sound cool?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So on the poll, here are the game consoles that we had available to vote for. We had the Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation, N64, PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, Wii, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Game Boy, and Game Boy Advanced. And Game Boy obviously includes Game Boy Color. So, did you get a chance to look at who won before you came today?
No.
No? Okay, cool.
Who do I think won then?
Yeah, do you want to take a guess at who won? So it was kind of between two.
I'm guessing PlayStation 5. It's freaking huge right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's the number one console right now for sure.
Yeah. So that would be my guess.
So it was not PlayStation 5. The winner, it came down to two consoles. It was really neck and neck throughout the week, but it came down to the Nintendo Switch and the N64.
And Nintendo Switch is just killing it.
Yeah, still
that relevant. Makes sense. That totally makes sense. I mean, really, if you voted for N64, you voted for Nintendo Switch. So
yeah, kind of. A lot of them are on there, but I think that goes back to how many people had the N64. There's probably a lot of nostalgia attached to that too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, the Star Wars pod racing game.
Yeah, that game was pretty cool.
It was sick.
Except the name of it, because it wasn't called Star Wars Pod Racing. It was called the name of that game.
Pod Racing or something?
You'd think it'd be called Pod Racing, but it wasn't. It was it was a weird name. Everyone calls it Star Wars Pod Racing, but I don't know why they didn't go with that. So yeah, Switch was number one, N64 was number two, and then we have like a three-way tie, I think. No, a two-way tie for third, which is PlayStation 5, which you thought would be number one, and the Game Boy. Following that, and the Super Nintendo, three-way tie for third. Following that, for fourth, we have a three-way tie between the PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4. So, PlayStation racking in that fourth place. And then fifth place was the Game Boy Advanced, tied with the Wii, the GameCube, and the Xbox. and the Atari. And then consoles that did not get a vote: Nintendo, Sega Genesis. So clearly Nintendo won that war. No one even voted for the Genesis. And the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One. So that's kind of the current console war that's going on today, is we have the battle between PlayStation and Xbox and the Switch.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Switch has kind of found its own way of keeping the games kid friendly, really pulling on the heartstrings of people's youth. And they're kind of in my opinion, they're kind of in their own category.
Yeah.
And it seems like the Xbox and the PlayStation are kind of the console trying to compete right now.
Well, they're just like, yeah, right now. But, I mean, who knows? That's going to change in a bit here because...
Yeah, the Switch is getting some more mature games.
Call of Duty. I guess don't quote me on it, but I was told that they signed like a 10-year contract with Call of Duty. Or what? I don't remember the name of it.
I think the only thing keeping Xbox in the game is Halo, and Halo's since Halo 3, really, they just haven't put out good Halo games either. The Xbox exclusives are just not as good. Yeah,
and I think PlayStation comes out with more single player, better games. Like just
they have way better exclusives, and I think if you're gonna buy a system, that's definitely the route you go. Now I guarantee, Jordan, that Carson has probably commented upset that I said Xbox has lost the war already that's in place.
I gotta beat this, and then I'll look at his comments.
But okay, let's see. Oh, that wasn't your last lap?
I guess this is a long round.
It is. Map. You got to take the shortcut, man. You got to fall off the bridge to take the shortcut.
I'm doing good enough.
Okay. So, yeah. Anyway. So, I have a couple of fun things on here. I have the top-selling consoles of all time and the game that was most successful, and then some notable video game consoles that flopped. So, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go over that, and then... you could share your top 10, George. So coming in at number 10 is let's start at number 10, work our way up, and then you can guess, George, you can guess the top 3, okay? Based on what we're going through right now.
Okay.
Does that work? Okay. All right, so coming in at number 10 is the Game Boy Advanced. Number 9 is the Xbox, and that had 81 million.
Is this grossing games? Yes.
Highest selling.
Okay,
so, sorry. It's just consoles sold, not the amount of money revenue gained from the consoles. So number 10 is Game Boy Advance with 81 million copies or consoles sold. Number 9 is Xbox 360 with 84 million. Number 8 is PlayStation 3 with 87 million. 7 is Wii. I actually don't know why I don't have the number on there. I must have forgot. I don't have how many million. PlayStation is number 6 at 102 million. PlayStation 4 is number 5 at 117 million. Number 4 is the Game Boy and Game Boy Color at 118 million. And do you want to guess the top three selling consoles of all time? Yeah, look.
Yeah, I can't see from here anyways.
Okay,
good. Let's see. I bet of all time.
Of all time.
PlayStation 5.
So PlayStation 5 didn't even make the top 10 because it's so new.
Okay, then PlayStation 4.
So PlayStation 4 was number 5. I did say. This is making me feel...
Trying to do both, so...
It's okay. So number 3 was the Nintendo Switch, which is still on the market today. So there's a couple that are still on the market. So still on the market today, number 3. And that it has over 125 million units sold. Number 2 is the Nintendo DS at 154 million.
Wow.
And the number 1 selling console as of right now is the PlayStation 2. With over
PlayStation 2 was dope.
Over 155 million consoles sold. So
that's wild.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That was good too. PlayStation 2 was great. I remember buying that one and
Do you want to guess what the highest grossing game, the highest selling game on the PlayStation 2 was? I got that here. Anyone in the chat want to guess? It wasn't Tony Hawk. That's a good guess. I would have thought Tony Hawk.
Let's see. Beatles Rock Band.
Our dad guessed that. Beatles Rock Band. It's definitely there. It's got to be up there. No, it wasn't Beatles Rock Band.
Carson said, and I didn't say anything else. So he's in thought.
It's Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas.
Oh, okay.
Number 1.
Okay.
The highest selling game on this the Nintendo DS is the new Super Mario Brothers. Nintendo Switch, we already did this one. You could probably guess. Highest selling game on Nintendo Switch.
Zelda?
Nope, Mario Kart.
Mario Kart.
But I bet the new Zelda overtake. Well,
I don't know. Talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked about it before.
I don't remember yesterday, everybody. I don't remember sometimes a couple hours ago. So I'm sorry if I repeat myself or if I suck at guessing games.
Yeah. The Game Boy highest grossing game was Tetris, technically. A lot of people argue because it was a pack-in game, it doesn't count. So, and there's a pack-in with every single one sold. So, Pokemon Red is the highest, if you think that way.
Carson thought it was Animal Crossing.
No, it wasn't Animal Crossing.
That's big right now.
Yeah.
That's huge right now.
Big game. Yeah, so PlayStation's highest was... PlayStation 4's highest. This is kind of interesting. What do you think the PlayStation 4's highest grossing game is?
Highest grossing game?
Yeah. Well, highest selling. Most copies sold.
Maybe PlayStation 4. Maybe God of War?
Good guess. I would never have guessed this. Spider-Man.
Dude, that game's dope. I have that game. It is sick.
It's the number 1 grossing game.
So well done.
Or highest selling game.
Yeah, I really liked that one.
Couple other fun ones. GTA 5 is the highest selling game on the PlayStation 3, and it's the highest selling game on the Xbox One. So,
yeah, that makes sense. I guess the newest game, GTA, is supposed to be like the biggest game ever, and it's actually got like real streets in Florida in the game and stuff. And it's supposed to be huge.
GTA 5, I'm pretty sure. I almost thought we should do it for this podcast, but maybe we'll do it for another one where we'll do the highest selling games of all time, but it's up there. It's one of the top ones, GTA 5.
That really doesn't surprise me. I guess I could have, thought it through more.
Oh, this is kind of a funny one. Which one do you think Xbox 360? If you had to pick Xbox 360's highest selling game, what would you think?
The primary game I played on there, I want to say Halo, but
that's what I would have thought.
Call of Duty, just because I
Halo
played it
or Call of Duty. That's what I would have thought. Connected Ventures. Connected Ventures. I don't even know what that game is.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's the highest one.
That's great. That's a fun game that we don't know.
Yeah, must need to play it. So a couple of just other consoles that are pretty popular and where they ranked. You have number 13 highest selling console is the Nintendo with 61 million. Number 14 is the Xbox One, 58 million. Number 15, Super Nintendo with 49 million. And then the PlayStation 5, which just came out, is number 17 and still on the market, and it's 38 million.
Do you think it's that low because of how much people can't get them because they sell out so quick? Like they didn't put enough out on the market.
Yeah, I think it's new. I think also people have a PlayStation 4 that has all the games when they stop making the new games on the PS4 as well. They just announced that they're
stopping.
Are they?
Yeah.
I think that'll boost sales. I anticipate at some point that console's gonna slowly creep up the list. But it's already sold more than N64 ever did. So the Nintendo 64 sold 32.9 million. And then the Sega Genesis at number 19, sold 30 million. The Xbox is number 21 with 24 million. Surprise there. Also, to point out how Sega only had one game, guess what Sega's number 1 selling game is?
It has to be Sonic.
Yep, Sonic the
Okay.
Hedgehog. Guess what their number 2 selling game is?
Sonic 2.
Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Because they came out with Sonic Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And guess what number 3 is? And this is when you know
No way.
they only had one game.
Sonic 3 for real?
So
Is it
number
Sonic-
3 is they didn't have any more Sonic games on
okay.
that
I'm
console.
like, what?
Number 3 is Aladdin. So literally people just played Sonic on the Sega.
And Aladdin came in with 3 buys.
It was a significant drop too. But
Yeah.
Aladdin's a cool game. It's a fun game, but you wouldn't think it'd be a top seller on a console. That shows that literally the only game Sega had, in my opinion, was Sega, and then they had Mortal Kombat with violence.
Yeah.
I think also one thing that we didn't talk about that kind of plays into people's favorite consoles, you kind of just had one system, and whatever system you had, you loved because that's what you had. So if you had a Sega, you had a Sega. If you had a PlayStation, you had a PlayStation. If you had a Nintendo, you had a Nintendo, you know? There weren't a lot of people that had all the consoles. So I think that plays into it too.
Which is how it worked out for my top 10 as well, I think. Because I didn't have my Super Nintendo for forever. Like, I didn't have a N64 for forever.
On your main
It just
gaming
kinda like-
age years wasn't SNES wasn't the newest console. 64 was. PlayStation was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I remember keeping those. Maybe I haven't kept them as long, but I feel like they were like a bigger part of my life. But I also had a lot of friends that liked to game at that point, and when I was younger, like we still were playing outside and knocking on each other's doors. Hey,
Yeah.
come out and play. A little bit more. So
Well, just some notable video game
Excuse me.
console flops, and then we'll go into your top 5, my top 5. You can do your 10.
Yeah.
And then we'll call it good.
Yeah.
So notable video games that flopped. The Virtual Boy, we talked about that in our Mario episode.
Yeah.
It was basically your first VR. Did terrible. Did not sell well at all.
very impressive though for its time.
Yeah, if you like getting sick, yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah. So,
It's just basically a close-up television on your face. But the Wii U, I don't know if you ever heard of the Wii U. It was basically right before the Switch. It was like
it was after. Oh, sorry. Yeah, right before the Switch. I thought you
as a
said Wii.
handheld.
It was
Wii.
right after the Wii. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a handheld,
Sorry.
and it did terrible. Philips CDI we talked about. Nintendo's team up with Philips, and it did awful. Flopped really hardcore. They were gonna try and release a Mario game on there. It never happened. The Atari, this is kind of funny. So these are flops. So the Atari did well on the first Atari, the 2600, and I think I actually have where that ranked on here. Atari 2600 is still the 20th highest selling console of all time with 30 million. But flops from Atari include the Atari 5200, Jaguar, Lynx, and VCS. So they put out 4 other consoles after the 26, and they flopped hardcore. They did not do well. And then we have, this is kind of interesting. Have you ever heard of the Pippin?
I've heard of it. I know nothing about it though.
So
I've only probably because I've heard of it from Dylan.
So the Pippin was Apple's first attempt at a console. And I guess if you think the Sega was pricey at $499, of course, as everything is with Apple, the Apple flopped hardcore. The Pippin flopped hardcore. Although I do like that name for a console. Pippin reminds me of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
$599 in 1996. Money. $599 they expected people to pay. No wonder it flopped. It also came out after the N64 and after the PlayStation. So people already had those consoles, and so it flopped hardcore. And Apple's never recovered, clearly. They've never done video game console since. The Sega Saturn, which we talked about, the Sega Dreamcast, and then the PlayStation. PlayStation had like a handheld version called the Vita is what I have on here. I hope that's Vita.
PlayStation Vita.
Vita? Is that what it is?
It's it's like the PSP is what it.
Yeah, like the portable, but it flopped hardcore. So just some notable ones that are kind of interesting. I thought the Pippin was the Pimpin. That would have been like the Pippin. Pimpin. That's how they should have marketed it.
Yeah.
You had to be
And
a
all the
pimp to
pimps
afford a
would buy it.
$5.99. They should have had the OG GTA on there, and then we should have been on their marketing team. Would have got that
for
sold.
sure. Easy.
Yeah.
We would have sold it on this podcast, and they would have got like 14 people to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we love all 14 of you on
Thank you.
streaming.
Yes.
So, chat, we're going to talk about our top 5 games, and then we're going to call it a night. So, Jordan has 10. I just have 5. But throw in your favorite video games, consoles. Why don't we hold off on playing for yours, and we'll start with yours, and then we'll go through it. So, what are your top 10, Jordan?
Let's see. Carson said he loved God of War for sure. By the way, but
Was God of War? I've never played it. Is that specific to a certain console? Is that only a PlayStation game? Okay,
I'm pretty sure. Let's see. You want me to start at my first or?
No, start at your 10. Work your way up.
Okay.
I wonder if we have the same top. We'll go to your first 5, and then we'll count down our 5s.
Okay. My 10th is my 10th is the PS1. And then 9th is Wii, 8th is PS2.
You picked Wii ahead of PlayStation, even though we never had a Wii.
I played it a lot with my friends growing up. So
when you were a wee lad,
when I was a wee little lad, 7th was Xbox, 6th was Xbox 360, and then to start my 5 out, my 5th was Game Boy Color. And man, that was the best road trip thing ever.
Game Boy Color.
I loved the fact that I could just all the way to California. Every time we went, rocking my Game Boy.
That was number 5 for you?
That's my 5.
Okay. Number 5 for me was the Xbox.
Okay.
I just love Halo. That was awesome. The game was awesome.
Yeah, you got to give it up for like the LAN parties we did and stuff.
Yeah.
It was definitely, I mean, it was close. And
right
Xbox
before
360.
Live hit, that was so much fun. Like, you'd get
together
the cables through all the rooms. Everyone would bring their TV over, and you'd get a bunch of pizzas, and you just play until 4 in the. I still remember Mom coming out of bed at like 3 in the morning being like, enough, turn off the game. It's time. It is time. This is the 4th time I've come out here to tell you to stop. Yeah. So number 5, Xbox. I honestly feel like I should move it higher just because of how much fun
I should have moved it higher. We had a lot of fun.
In fact, I'm gonna change it. So my number 4 console is gonna be the Super Nintendo.
Okay, so I'll put that on my 5.
Or sorry, I mean number 5 is gonna be the Super Nintendo, and number 4. Actually, I'm gonna move it higher. So number 5 is gonna be the Super Nintendo. For me, obviously, it's just a staple. It's really good. Played it a lot, but it was kind of in your room. I didn't play it quite as much. Has some solid games. Super Mario World. That's the top grossing game for that. We learned about that in our episode. But yeah. So, what's your number 4?
The Nintendo Switch.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's got it all, and I kind of have to mix that a little bit with the N64 because it brings me back. But so I didn't put the N64 because the Nintendo Switch has it all for me.
Yeah.
So that's why that made it over the Nintendo 64.
Fair enough.
Yeah. What's your 3rd?
So
your 4th?
My 4th is going to be the Xbox 360.
Okay.
I just played a lot of Call of Duty on there. I remember when we were roommates with our buddy Jeremy, and played a ton of Call of Duty on that one, and that was when I got into live for the first time. So that's my number 4.
I like that. My number 3 was Super Nintendo, which I also kind of put like somewhere around that N64. I just didn't get to play it as much. Great games on both, but Super Nintendo's great. But the Switch just brings that back for me. So that's why my list is 10, because it kind of like, I have a big mix between like 4 to 6
I get it.
of them. So, and then, I just got out. Sorry.
It's okay. You want me to do my number 3?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I just want to. I just look so excited.
Okay, so my number 3 is going to be the PlayStation 2. Loved the PlayStation 2. Loved playing Tony Hawk. It was your PlayStation 2, which is why I don't think it got top of my list. You actually bought that with your own money. So, and plus everything that you wanted out of the PlayStation, you could have on the PlayStation 2. So I really liked the PlayStation 2 is my number 3. I played that a lot.
That's awesome. I like that too.
So your number 3.
My number 3. Oh, I already gave my number 3.
Did you? What was your 5, 4, 3?
Super Nintendo. Game Boy Color, which I switched to Xbox. And then Nintendo Switch, and then Super Nintendo.
Okay. Well, then give us your number 2.
My number 2 is Xbox One.
Xbox One.
Yep.
I never had that, so I didn't even make my list.
I played a ton of Call of Duty on it with my friends, Dylan, Baker, like all of them. So
my number 2 is the Nintendo Switch.
Awesome.
I don't even own a Switch, and it's my number 2.
That's okay. He plays mine. He's like, oh, I had a surgery. Can I borrow your Nintendo Switch?
Oh, it's my birthday. Let me borrow your Nintendo Switch.
Oh, I'm gonna go out for what's that thing? Oh, young men's.
Oh yeah.
Can we borrow your Nintendo Switch for fun, young men's? Yeah, man.
To be clear, if anyone doesn't know what Young Men's is, it's just a youth group that I'm a part of. I'm a leader in a youth group, and we do Mario Kart all the time.
I thought it was self-explanatory, but I'm sorry.
If you're from Utah, it is.
Yeah.
But if there's anyone listening not from Utah,
it'd be like
Young
maybe
Men's.
like
What's
I
Matt
guess
doing
like
on Young
Scouts
Men's?
could be more of like similar.
Yeah,
to
it's the
that.
Scouts. It's basically
like a Scouts. Yeah. And then what was your number 2 was?
Well, I'll do my
Switch.
number
That's
1
awesome.
then. My number 1
ahead.
is N64. I think that's the reason why I want to get back into this podcast. One of the things that kind of got me hyped on this podcast is one of the things I love about the Switch. I just have so many memories of that console growing up, and one of the best Christmases of my life, really. I mean, I just remember being so excited, and so N64 for me, just nostalgic. It takes me right back to being a kid again, and so that's my number 1. What's yours?
Awesome. My number 1 is PlayStation 4, and I'm going to have to slash that with PlayStation 5 because I'm going to get one soon. I know it. I've just been holding off because I do have the games that I play right now on the PS4, and they've made them for both, but pretty soon they're going to stop, and I'm going to get the PlayStation 5 anyways. But awesome games all the way around. I played one of my favorite games, and I guess I should have thrown this out. I believe it was on PS2. Battlefront.
Oh, Star Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah, that game's really
that
sweet.
was on PlayStation 2. But the new one's sick too. That one's so much fun. There's so many good games, like the Assassin's Creeds are so good. I really liked the Valhalla one. I heard the Pirates one was amazing. Black Flag, I think that one's called. My little brother raves about that one.
Yeah, I've never played Assassin's Creed.
They're really good. And then now that Call of Duty's on it, for sure, that's why it's my top, because it's I have Call of Duty from Xbox. The only thing I'm missing out really on PlayStation is the Nintendo games, which I have the Switch, so that's fine. And then Halo from Xbox. So I think Xbox had some cool kind of multiplayer, cool random games. There were some pretty sweet ones out there, but I definitely think
exclusives
PlayStation just
other
ended
than
up having
Halo.
so many more. Yeah.
Well, so I think that's it. We've got a little bit over. We got a little all over the place when we were trying to play games too, and but thank you for those that stuck around and were part of our poll. Next week we have another guest coming on. Our good buddy and old roommate Jeremy Wise is going to be coming on the podcast, and we're going to talk all things Tony Hawk. It's going to be Tony Hawk, a history.
Awesome. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be super fun. So we'll probably put up another poll. What's your favorite Tony Hawk game? Maybe something like that. I don't know. But we're going to talk Tony Hawk. We're also going to just talk skateboard games in general. That's what he wanted to play, and that's what he wanted to talk about. So we're going to do that next week. So tune in next week. Anything else, Jordan, before we go?
No, that's it.
Okay. Anything else from the chat?
I don't know. Not quick enough. I'm sorry. The Xbox Connect was kind of cool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Came out
It's
with
first
the,
kind of like fruit chopper. Remember
yeah,
that?
yeah. But I think I haven't played too many games with the Xbox Connect. I know I had it, but it was mainly like Xbox on. Sweet. That's why I got my Xbox Connect. And now you got Alexa to do that for you anyways.
Yeah, you don't even need it. All right. Well,
yeah. Hey, thanks for chiming in, guys. Sorry I don't get to all the comments, but I think it's so awesome that you guys are kind of chatting through it. We really appreciate it. I keep slapping my leg, and I think you guys probably keep hearing that too.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week. Write into us and at Super Davis Davies Bros at gmail.com, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.
Hey, have a good one, guys.